and welcome to Kaleidoscope. And today, I'm your host, Jane Penwell, and I have with me a guest. Remember, I told you, if you're a watcher, you'll know, I told you I was going to have guest co-hosts. So today, we have a guest co-host by the name of Sue Boyd, and if you're a longtime watcher, you'll remember that Sue Boyd's been on this program, I think twice.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm sure twice, because once with your Ethiopia trip, pictures and stuff, and then when you went to Washington for the, what was it, Million?
No, it was the Jon Stewart Restore Sanity March.
Oh, okay, okay. No Million.
No million, and we still don't have sanity, so.
Well, I was just going to say restore.
Yeah, right.
It
was a valiant effort.
Yeah, kind of indicates that we had it in Washington and some.
Right.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe in the 20s, the 30s, I don't know. Before my time, anyway. So today, we are going to talk about Africa in, not the whole continent. We're going to zero in on a country. And we're also going to talk about African musical instruments, and specifically an instrument called the mbira, which I never even knew existed until a couple of weeks ago when Sue and I and a lot of other people went to I don't know, would we call that a concert?
No, a performance.
Kind of, a performance.
An mbira performance.
An mbira performance. The performance was by a lady who is from Zimbabwe. So she is a recognized player of this instrument, a master of this instrument. And she played by herself, and then there were some other people there, and they played together. And then there was dancing, and it was a lot of fun, truthfully. It was really fun to watch. And yours truly almost got up and danced because I love to dance, but I stifled myself and didn't. But my feet were moving because there's a rhythm. There's a certain, I don't know what it is exactly, how to describe it, but the songs have their own rhythm. There's no drum or anything, but there is a rhythm that comes out of it. And somewhere over my long years of listening to NPR and who knows what else, watching documentaries, I have heard that some music that is tribal, like anywhere in the world, it's used for a ceremony or it's used for like a hunt, if you're going to go on a hunt, this kind of thing, that the rhythm will mimic the beating of the human heart. I've heard that. I don't know if it's true.
I don't know if that's true, but the mbira and other instruments, African instruments, have multiple rhythms. The African music is very heavy on rhythmic things, and there will be 5 or 6 rhythms going at any given time, and the instruments are designed to allow you to do that. It boggles my mind.
Yeah, it boggles mine too.
I can't begin to keep rhythm. If you noticed, are we going to show the video?
Yes, we are, but not right now.
Well, there was a person there who was keeping a different rhythm from the player, if you noticed.
And as a Westerner, I'm used to 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3,
right.
Or
that's not,
1, 2, 3,
that's
4.
not African.
1, 2, 3, 4. It's it's totally not African.
Polyrhythmic.
At all. Yes, and so it took me a while to catch on. I had to listen to it for a while before I kind of got it. I think of myself as a person who has rhythm. I don't necessarily have any much vocal ability, but it's funny, my aunt tried to teach me to play the piano. And she sat me down and she said, okay, now play Happy Birthday. And I went, do, 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 do. One key. She said, well, you got the rhythm anyway. Okay. So that's me. So I was fascinated by this, and the fact that we're going to show you a picture of this instrument in a minute, and you know, it looks kind of like a little teeny weeny piano. There it is. And it's, you know, it's not very big, it's not huge, but boy does it have a big sound. And on the tape, when you see it, the people who are playing this instrument, you won't see the instrument at all because there's a gourd,
a calabash,
calabash that it's inside of. And they do that for resonance, right?
Right, for amplification. Right.
So to me, with absolutely no experience with any kind of African instruments at all, the only thing my ear could equate it to was kind of a xylophone or steel drum, almost steel drumish. Not totally, but you know how you try to put two and two together. I guess your brain is always trying to do that, make connections, and that's kind of the connection I made. So it's a lovely, mellow, beautiful sound. It really is. And it echoed in that room so nicely, too. I like that. And then, you know, she really wanted people to get up and dance. And so finally...
That's always the case with African stuff. It's interactive. It's never exactly a performance.
So you don't just sit there.
You don't just sit there, not with African music.
Which I think's fine, you know.
Yeah.
I like that idea. And so finally people did, as you will see, people did dance, and it was really fun to see. But before we get to the tape and get to all that, I do want to tell you where it's from and where our principal artist was from, and that is Zimbabwe. Now, I hate to say that I'm going to assume that you don't know where Zimbabwe is, but I certainly did not. I knew I heard of it. I've heard of it, but to actually pinpoint it on the map of Africa, if you can do that, good for you. I could not. I kind of thought it was southern, but I wasn't sure. And so let me just read a little blurb, which maybe will help you to get it kind of into perspective. This is from Wikipedia. Zimbabwe, officially the Republic of Zimbabwe, is a landlocked country located in southern Africa between the Zambezi and Limpopo rivers. It borders South Africa to the south. So South Africa, you know, is the last country before you sail away from Africa. So it's the one at the tip. Botswana to the west, and Zambia to the northwest, and Mozambique to the east. The capital and largest city is Harare. And it says, since the 11th century, present-day Zimbabwe has been the site of several organized states and kingdoms, as well as a major route for migration and trade. The British South Africa Company of Cecil Rhodes first demarcated the present territory during the 1890s. And there it is then, that's a close-up of it. Now Rhodes, you were talking about Rhodes a little bit earlier. If you don't know who he is, he's the guy that really started the diamond trade, I think.
Right.
You know, there's several really
He's
good...
the one who really exploited South Africa.
He caught on to the fact that, hoo-hoo, I think there's money to be made here.
Oh, yes.
And he did a darn good job of it. And I wish I could remember, and I'll try to remember and tell you next week, but there's a series of books, and I've read maybe the first two. They're fiction, but they're fiction based on the life of Cecil Rhodes. And, you know, the way that their fiction is, they imagine things that he said and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But the real facts are pretty much as they were. And he had, I mean, nobody can have a life like that anymore. It just can't happen, you know? So, because South Africa, I don't even know if South Africa was actually South Africa, you know, when Rhodes first got there. But I guess a lot of that happened because of the war.
Because of wars and Europeans imposed boundaries on countries that didn't, they weren't countries, they were stateless societies that didn't have borders.
Yeah.
And so all the borders in Africa are artificial.
And
Created by some European somewhere.
right. And in an effort to say, this is mine. This country
This is
here
mine.
is mine.
This is mine, and it's not yours. And it was originally called Rhodesia. So
And there you go.
after Rhodes, and the Rhodes scholars are from Rhodes too.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So he did.
That's a good thing he did.
I was going to say he did something good.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
like Andrew Carnegie, he
Right.
did all the steel,
Yeah.
but he also did something good. So Nobel.
Yeah.
Those guys, I guess, after they make all their money, you know, they start thinking, well, what have I done? What good thing have I done? And then they create something that is great and wonderful. Okay, it's an ethnically diverse country of roughly 13 million. So that's a pretty big, you know, that's a pretty big country, 13 million.
Well, it's about, I would say, about 2/3 the size of Texas.
Okay.
So
So bigger than a lot of American states.
bigger than a lot of American states. Yes.
Has 16 official languages with English, Shona, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to pronounce that.
Belly.
Ndebele, the most commonly used. So Shona is what we're going to speak of here pretty much, because the Mbira is the instrument of the Shona people and created by them.
Right.
And they use it in a lot of their ceremonies. And you'll probably hear the lady who played it here speaking about this on the tape, that they use it to call the ancestors, and so on. And I have a little blurb about it too. I'm not going to bore you by reading it word for word. Don't worry. Don't panic. Don't change that dial. I'm not giving you a lecture. But I find this stuff interesting. I really do. I'm fascinated by it, because from nothing, somebody created this pretty sophisticated instrument. It's fantastic.
Well, the one you showed is more elaborate than many, it's with the double keys and all of this sort of thing. The thing about African instruments is that they're always made out of whatever was at hand. You know, a piece of wood, bamboo or metal or
And you see bottle
strings,
caps.
bottle caps. Yeah. The African people were, I mean, and this is generally true, are quite musical, and they will make music and percussion with whatever is at hand.
I love that.
Which is really fun. Yeah,
Right.
it's a major part of almost every ethnic group in Africa.
So you don't have to have a formal oboe or whatever. You find something, and that's probably how all music.
Well, one of my favorite memories of our time in Kenya was going out on a very small boat with a bunch of guys, and Alan asked them to sing some of the songs that they would sing when they were fishing. And so they started to sing, but then they started doing the rhythm with bottles, and they were hitting the side of the boat and whatever, and they had all these multi-rhythms going with the tune over it.
Wow.
Just and out of nothing, bottles and cans and their hands and slapping themselves and
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, you know, my father's people came here from Wales, and the Welsh are very musical too, in a different way entirely. But what the Welsh did, I don't think they ever created any instruments, but their voices.
Yeah.
They created some wonderful harmonies, which
Right.
you hear in Welsh music, that are kind of different from other harmonies. So they just used their voices, which, you know, my father said, his father said, that at night when the miners came, you know, like they'd come down those big mountains down into the valleys where they lived, and they would sing and it would echo.
Yeah.
And he said his father said that it brought tears to his eyes whenever he thought about it. So
Right.
I think your music is important, you know, it's your place kind of. It's what you know about. So now let's talk a little bit about the instrument, the mbira, or thumb piano. So when you see somebody playing this, they play it with their thumbs?
Play it with their thumbs.
Oh, interesting. Because I was thinking there's enough room for all.
No, it's not a keyboard in
not
that
like
sense.
a piano or anything.
Well, because it takes a little pressure to to flip the
and
metal.
to get that note
Right.
coming out. Okay, and the kind of the background of it, it says that Joseph H. Howard, owner of the largest collection of drums and ancillary folk instruments in the Americas, and a Nigerian drummer, argued that the mbira is thoroughly African, being found only in areas populated by Africans or their descendants. So this was not created after Africans saw Western pianos.
No.
This was created solely from Africa. In Eastern and Southern Africa, there are many kinds of mbira, usually accompanied by the hosho, which I'm sorry, I don't know what that is. It was reported to be used in southeastern Nigeria, but it's a common musical instrument of the Congo, but mostly the Shona people of Zimbabwe.
And surrounding.
Yeah. And it says that it appears to have been invented twice in Africa. This is Wikipedia, so we don't know. A wood or bamboo tined instrument appeared on the west coast of Africa about 3,000 years ago, and metal tined lamellophones appeared in the Zambezi River. Remember, Zimbabwe is the Zambezi River is one of its borders, around 1,300 years ago. So. And then
Well, you've got to have metal to do that. So
right, it helps to have metal.
It helps to have metal. Otherwise, you're using bamboo.
Exactly, right. And you're going to get a different tone, I'm sure,
right.
from bamboo than they get from this metal, little metal thing that they do play it with their thumbs. I'm curious now. I wish we had one. And it says these instruments traveled all across the continent. So
they say that, but I was sitting with a friend from Liberia, and I asked her if she'd ever seen an mbira in Liberia, and she said, no, I've never seen one in Kenya or Ethiopia. So they really are a Shona instrument, and they really are kind situated in Zaire, Zimbabwe, and that general area.
That southern part of Africa.
Right.
So the purpose of the it says here in Shona music, it's actually called in the Shona language, the translation is voice of the ancestors. So it had a purpose in ceremonies. It's a musical instrument that's been played by them for thousands of years, frequently played at religious ceremonies and social gatherings. So it's very significant. The instrument is very significant in Shona religion and culture, considered a sacred instrument by the Shona people. It's usually played to facilitate communication with ancestral spirits. Within the Shona tradition, the mbira may be played with paired performers and a caller who leads the performed piece, and then a responder interlocks a subsequent part. So our person on the tape, the lady on the tape who's playing the instrument, actually says at one point, I'm going to play a song, and it's the one we use to call the ancestors. And so this is a very integral part of the instrument. So fascinating. I find all this to be so interesting. I love it. So when you were in Ethiopia, what instrument did you see there for the most part?
Well, Ethiopia being a Christian country, or 4th century Christian country, even though we're probably 40% Muslim now as well, they use a lot of religious instrumentation, drums for sure, big drums, and a little thing called a sistrum that is a percussion instrument too, but you just shake it and it makes this little shaking sound. They have a violin of sorts called a masenko that has a single string. Nowadays, of course, in modern music, they play all kinds of things.
Oh, sure.
But traditionally, at least in the Highlands, that's the kind of thing that we saw.
And that reminds me of the person who was shaking and I don't know, maybe those things she was shaking, maybe that's the Hosho. I don't
That could
know.
be, yeah.
But you'll see also, there's 3 people that you're going to see. The one woman is standing up and shaking these 2 instruments and creating we were just talking about this, the rhythm that's created.
Is different from what
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
they say. There'll be 5 or 6 rhythms going at the same time.
And she was doing 2 or 3 of them
Right,
herself.
yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It took me a while to catch on, to exactly how, because we're used to like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and this isn't that. It's very different. But yet, if you listen long enough, you can catch on. You get it. You kind of. So it was a lot of fun to see everybody there respond to this music. And there were a fair number of African students there. And they were, I think, slowly, right in the beginning, she kept saying, well, isn't anybody going to dance? And everybody's just kind of, no. And then,
Well, probably they weren't Zimbabweans. They were
Oh,
the
probably
African
not.
students were probably from other parts of Africa.
But eventually,
yeah.
everybody, not just the African students, but everybody eventually got the spirit,
The spirit,
and
right.
lots of people got up and moved around. And kids, kids, they don't have any inhibitions, so they jumped around. And I was watching them, and they jump around kind of to the rhythm. They got it instinctively somehow, as kids do. They're always the first to learn a language when you go somewhere. And so they did. But the whole presentation, the acoustics of it are what I think is so lovely. I really enjoy it. Absolutely enjoyed it. And then the whole performance was sponsored by the International Studies, Office of International Studies. Is that right, at OU?
I don't remember. Probably International Student and Faculty Services was involved. Probably the International Student Union was involved. There are a lot of international organizations on campus.
It's kind of amazing how many there really are. It really is. And they're kind of, the international organizations kind of integrate all with each other, because there were people from other areas of the world there, not just...
Well, the International Student Union is an umbrella organization for the African students, the Chinese students, the Indonesian students, and so forth. So, yeah.
So they all get to hear about it.
They all get to hear about it, right.
And several of the kids that were dancing to the music were Chinese kids that got up. So there were people from everywhere. So that's also fun. That's a lot of fun. The only thing that would have made it more fun is if we had African food, which we did not have.
No, there was no food.
I mean, there was food, but it wasn't African. It was American. And I thought, oh, too bad, I'm always interested in food and where it comes from and what it tastes like. And as a part of a country, if you go to a country, you get a smell. You talked about that going into the Ethiopian restaurant. Or was it a restaurant or grocery?
It was a grocery store. It was an Ethiopian grocery store. And I had a very emotional response.
Yeah, I can believe it, because I have a similar, it has nothing to do with groceries, but my grandmother, who I just was crazy about and stayed with a lot when I was growing up, used oil of wintergreen on her arthritic parts, most specifically her thumbs. She always smelled of oil of wintergreen. Now, I did not consciously think, oh, my grandmother smells like oil of wintergreen. But at some point in time, when maybe she had passed away, I don't even remember when, where, I smelled oil of wintergreen. I had that same, oh my gosh, I was back.
Visceral reaction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Back in my grandmother's house, the whole 9 yards. And so I think a lot of times we don't know how powerful smells are for us.
It's supposed to be one of the most important memory smells.
Yeah.
memory senses.
And we don't think a thing of it, for the
No,
most
it's very
part.
subtle, and but I wouldn't have said that Ethiopia has a specific smell, but when I smelled it,
You knew.
I knew, right.
Well, it's I don't know, a combination of things, of course, not just one thing. But when you travel from country to country, if you're on a vacation or whatever you're doing, I've noticed myself, and then you get back to the U.S. and you think, you go into the airport and you go through customs and you come out and you don't, a lot of times I haven't gotten like a boom smell. So maybe it's that I'm so familiar with it, I don't smell it,
Right.
the U.S.
We're getting pretty far away from the Imperial.
Yes, true. I have to chat.
I know you do.
I'm such a
Right.
chatter. So what we need to do now is, now you know what an mbira is, you know where it came from, you know it's an African instrument. Let's let you have a little glimpse of the instrument being played by a master. They made that clear
Yes.
when we were there, that the person who's performing for you is a master. So enjoy.
It's called mbira. Can you all say mbira? Mbira. Good. It's made of wood and metal keys. And down here we have the bottle caps, which give a buzzing sound. This instrument has been used for over 1,000 years in Zimbabwe by Shona people. They use it to call ancestral spirits. In other words, we call it our cell phone when we want to communicate with the ancestral world. Usually when you play this music back home, everyone will be participating either by clapping hands, nodding, dancing, or singing. So my next song is called Maororo, which is a victory song. So I will ask you to sing with me. Can you pronounce the following words after me? They are vocables. Iyawoye wo. Can you? Iyawoye wo. Good. So you will sing like this. Iyawoye wo. 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 For female spirits, enjoy.
Well, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found that mellow sound of the mbira as lovely as I did. And you noticed the calabash, the big gourd, that you could see by the way that their arms moved. They were doing something in there, but you couldn't really see what. And I hope you noticed the lady with the shakers that was really doing the, I don't know.
Alternative rhythm.
Yes,
Yeah.
alternative rhythm. That whole thing is fascinating. And I was fascinated also by this idea of calling the ancestors. I wasn't sure. I mean, of course, you could imagine calling the ancestors, what that would be, but I wasn't sure what that meant in an African sense. And so Sue was saying.
Well, I was saying that for Africans, and I don't know that this is true all over Africa, but it's true certainly in many parts of Africa, that the ancestors aren't dead in the same sense that we think of death, but they are in a separate realm. But they can still, you can still interact with them, they can still affect your life, so you want to keep them on your side.
Happy ancestors.
You want happy ancestors. I remember a case here of a student who went to the mental health center, one of our African students, and the issue was that he had an issue with his uncle, and his uncle was acting on him and kind of making him crazy. And our psychologist had a really hard time figuring out how to deal with that, because it's not something in our frame of reference.
Right, it's not a Western concept.
The other thing I remember was an African student who died. This is probably in the 80s. And she had angered her African friends. And so at her funeral, which was an open casket, they were chewing her out. It was the only funeral where I've ever seen where they're talking back to the dead. But as I say, it's a different concept, that these people, though gone from our sight, are still in your life, very much in your life.
Interesting.
And so if they're calling the ancestors, I say they're trying to keep them on their side and placate them, and making sure that
and having a
they're going
ceremony.
and having a ceremony and all of that. Yes,
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
I love that.
it's a nice idea. To me, it's a very comforting idea.
Oh, it is. As I said, I have some ancestors, well, how far, I don't know how far back. I mean, I knew my grandparents, and I knew my grandmother on my mother's side's parents. They were both still alive when I was alive. That's as far back as I go. And some of them I would love to be able to call. Some of them, not so much. So I get it with the uncle,
Right, yeah.
I had an uncle that didn't care for much. So it's good and it's bad. The good ones, you're thrilled. The ones you maybe didn't have such a good rapport with, you're like, So isn't that a wonderful idea, though? It's like everybody's still around.
Everybody's still around. You just can't see them.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And we say here, I lost my mother. I did not lose my mother. I know exactly where she is.
Yeah, right.
But she's not,
Yeah.
here in a human form. But I did not lose her. I always find that to be kind of an odd thing that
Right,
we say.
right.
I lost my mother.
Right.
Well, anyway. So that's kind of an interesting thing. You might want to, learn more about that. I'm going to have a Halloween show, by the way.
Oh.
Yes, and we're going to talk about the ghosts of Athens.
Oh, okay.
Ghostly things of Athens. Not that I think that this is ghostly, but this idea of having your ancestors around you all the time and knowing that they're there and kind of depending on them, I guess, in some ways, is really interesting to me. And I wish I had that ability, but I don't. And also in the background when we were talking, you heard some African music, and it's from a CD that Sue brought. of an African performance by an African gentleman who is from.
He's probably from Senegal, Mali, I'm not sure. But the instrument is the kora, and it is, here's the, it's called the Mande Variations from Toumani Diabaté, very famous kora player. And the kora also uses the calabash, but the kora is a stringed instrument, 21 strings, and you play it facing you.
Oh.
As you see him standing, that he's in front of the, I don't know that you can see that, but.
We'll fix it so you can see it.
But the kora is my favorite African instrument, but it is played in the western part of Africa, not in the southern part of Africa. So.
And not in East Africa where you were.
Not in East Africa where we were, no.
Interesting.
We should say that if you want an mbira of your own, you can get it probably from Amazon.
Along with millions of other things.
Except that the ones that are sold in the West are keyed to a Western scale, and the ones that are played in Africa are not. I think it's the key of G. But it's a hard instrument to master, and somewhere it says here there are at most 10,000 people in the entire world who play the
There's
mbira.
your kora, right?
There's the kora.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
And that's fascinating. You know, the ability to figure out that gourd is going to provide the resonance. You know, that's really interesting. So we have.
Well, gourds are very important. I mean, they're for drumming and all kinds of things. Carrying water. I mean, these big gourds.
And they're huge.
They're huge. Yeah,
we don't
they're
grow
huge.
them that big here, I don't think, do we?
Well, probably maybe someplace, but
not Ohio anyway.
not Ohio.
The ones I've seen.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you're used to seeing those wee little ones like at Thanksgiving.
That doesn't do it.
Well, that's
calabash.
So many things that we have here that we grow are so miniature compared to what they look like where they really come from.
Right.
I'm thinking of poinsettias. If you see them in Mexico, they're like a bush.
Oh, we had ones that were 20 feet tall.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Ethiopia. Yeah.
And you would never know that if you just looked at what we get at Christmas time.
Yeah. Small
So-
trees.
Yes.
They were.
Well, at one place where I was in Mexico, they were a hedge.
Yeah.
They were all trimmed, you know,
Right,
and
right.
everything. I'm like, oh my God.
Well,
a
if you
hedge.
never have winter, then you can grow
Exactly.
things that are bigger.
Yes, and so the gourds in Africa are much bigger, probably much more colorful too than the ones that we have here. So this has been an interesting, for me, I hope you found it interesting too, an interesting little look into something that I knew nothing about whatsoever until I went to this performance, and I got really interested in this and this whole concept of calling the ancestors. I'm going to look into this more. I may have more on this later, but it's kind of I see it as a whole. The instrument is not alone. It's not like, oh, I'll play a flute, toodly doodly doo. It isn't like that. It's part of a whole ritual ceremony, you know, for a purpose.
And these ceremonies are very long. I mean, they can go on for hours and hours and hours. So,
yeah, it makes sense because you have to, if you are calling somebody, I guess you have to keep going till you feel like you got them, huh? And you know, I was saying to Sue earlier, I've been to several Native American ceremonies out in the Southwest, and they're very long too, very, very long. Same thing, same idea. And it's kind of almost hypnotic after a while. When you're sitting there, you don't, you kind of lose track of time. It isn't like something here, like a concert. It isn't like that
it
at
isn't
all.
like a concert, no.
No, so if you can ever experience that, it would be wonderful. So that is our hour for today. Thank you, Sue, for being here. I appreciate it. guest host, number one, numero uno here, Sue Boyd. We'll see who else pops up as time goes on. But next week, it'll just be me and 3 guys. Me and 3 guys. That sounds pretty good. So I hope you'll come back and see what we have for you next week, Athens. And goodbye. Have a wonderful week. I hope the weather stays as gorgeous as it is today.